Thank you for coming to our Geek Feminism panel. Thank you for, yes, I want you to applaud the feminism. I want you to do it. I want long, sustained applause for that word. I want it to be like Pee-wee's Playhouse. When you hear it, I want you to go crazy with how much you love it. And if you do that, points to you. So, I am your moderator for today. My job is to sort of help everybody get out the points that they want to get out and answer some of the questions that I have so thoughtfully designed at 6 o'clock this morning. And so I will introduce myself, and then I will ask, starting with Sarah down at the end, for everybody to introduce themselves, because their accomplishments are too numerous for me to memorize. So literally, I have read 5 of these books in 10 days. I can't hold more in my brain.
And
that's after turning in my 4th novel. So like, I really am. I'm like a leaky sieve at this point. So bear with me. Thank you for being patient. Thank you to my fellow panelists for being patient, and thank you for showing up. So without further ado, my name is Madeline Ashby. I am a science fiction writer and futurist, which means that companies ask me to write stories about technologies that they have in development, so that their engineers can decide the human cost of them. So I am also the author of the Machine Dynasty series from Angry Robot Books, which is about robots who eat each other, and an evil grandmother robot who lives in her granddaughter's head and encourages her to hurt people and burn things. And also this novel, Company Town, which is about a bodyguard for the United Sex Workers of Canada who defends her city from a serial killer from the future. So yeah, that is that book. That's me. And if you like, I would like to start with Sarah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sarah Kuhn. I'm the author of Heroine Complex, which is the first. Whoa! That was so nice. It's the first in a series starring Asian American superheroines. And there's so many cheers for that. It's good. I also wrote the Geek Girl romantic comedy novella One Con Glory, and I write some comics. I'm in the Eisner-nominated anthology Fresh Romance, which you can also buy here at the show. And I am working on a series of Barbie comics.
Woo! I am not working on a series of Barbie comics, but now I kind of wish I were.
Well, you can make that happen.
Okay. So my name is Kiersten White. I'm the author of the Paranormal Trilogy, the Mind Game series, Illusions of A, Chaos of Stars, and the Shadows with artist Jim DiBartolo.
Oh my God, you are the fastest talker known to me. Like, I'm sitting next to you, and I couldn't understand a word you just said.
You guys can just Google it. Come on, we have phones. And my newest release is I Darken, which stars a... Yes, thank you.
It's really good.
Thank you. We're married. In my dreams. And it stars a gender-swapped Vlad the Impaler. So, yeah, there you go.
Hi, my name's Kathleen Smith. I'm a licensed therapist and a mental health journalist, and my book, The Fangirl Life, A Guide to All the Feels and Learning How to Deal, came out a couple weeks ago. This is my first book, so I'm very heart eyes emoji up here with all these amazing ladies. So,
and we're all like therapists.
Yeah, also therapists. Also not a coincidence that they put me with no microphone on the panel with the therapist.
You seem to be doing just fine without one.
We can just talk about that after. I'm loving this call.
And that's Margaret. And
I'm Margaret Stohl. I'm here for Black Widow, Forever Red. And I hope you read Black Widow Red Vengeance out in the fall at retailers near you. And I just signed on to write Captain Marvel for Marvel's monthly comic. Boom! So that's my feelings about feminism, is we're all here to punch a few asteroids.
yes,
I did not know how that sentence was going to end, but well
So
played,
if you guys see any good Pokemon in the room, shout out. I'm not joking. Thank you very much. Because it's kind of dead right now.
Can Sabaa talk?
Yes, right.
I like listening to you talk. My name is Sabaa Tahir. I wrote... Oh, thank you, guys. I wrote this book, which I will probably knock over at least once with my water, so just be warned. It's called An Ember in the Ashes, the sequel is out on August 30th. It's called A Torch Against the Night, and it was a deeply scarring experience to write.
I'm not cheering for that.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, I'm Leigh Bardugo. I like that. I wrote the GRISHA Trilogy and Six of Crows, which is... we pitched it as Ocean's 11 meets Game of Thrones, but we found out that teenagers have not seen Ocean's 11. So now we're like, it's Now You See Me, and they're like, no. It's like Leverage without the morals. No. They're like, it's like Guardians of the Galaxy, and they're like, oh, I'll take 2. And the sequel, Crooked Kingdom, I feel so loud. The sequel, Crooked Kingdom, comes out on September 27th. I got one. It was also incredibly scarring to write, so yeah, high five.
All right. So, now you know all of us, or what we want you to know. So, leading with feminism, in what is an election year.
Wow, we're diving right in.
Yeah.
So we went right there.
That's good.
I don't not go there. I don't know how to not go there.
You live there.
I live there. Check my Twitter. I live there. Actually, I live in Canada now because I live there. I used to live here. Now I don't. So it's common. Lately, we've seen sort of this trend sometimes in entertainment culture and in mass culture among some like actresses and other celebrities and just sort of and like personal brands and so on. Rejecting the label of feminism and insisting, like some insist on the one hand that they want equal rights, but on the other hand that they don't want to identify as feminists. Sometimes because they wrongly believe that it means hating men, or because they identify as something else, like womanist or something like that. So, starting with Leigh.
Great.
Do you identify as a feminist, and why? Or if not, why not? Or if so, and I want all of us all of you to answer that question. Like starting with Leigh and moving on down.
I absolutely identify as a feminist. I think I understand why I think the fact that a lot of people try to distance themselves from the label speaks to the success that a lot of misogynists and sexists have had in undermining the movement. And I think it also speaks to the fact that it is not, we're not a worldwide conspiracy yet. And there's a lot of different movements within feminism, and they are sometimes at odds, so I can say simply, yes, I am a feminist, but I think it's always worth asking kind of what kind of feminist you are and kind of what goals you're trying to work towards as a feminist.
I'm totally not a feminist. No, I'm joking. I'm on this panel. Obviously, I am a feminist. Yeah, I'm absolutely a feminist, and I agree with what you're saying, and I think that another sort of issue that we're having is that I think that modern-day feminists or younger feminists don't, they've sort of had so many of the rights that have been fought for their whole lives, and they don't really understand what went on before to necessarily get those rights and to get that to happen. And I think that a lot of times what ends up happening is when you don't understand that history, then you think the word doesn't matter, and you think it doesn't matter if you say you're a feminist or not understanding that actually, yes, you have to keep carrying, and you have to keep carrying that torch forward. So that was not like me pointing to my book. That was not a plug. That was not
a torch against. You mean you have to get the ember burning?
Oh my God.
I set myself up for that. I'm so sorry.
I don't want to be considered a black widow.
But yeah, so I do think that the history of it is very important, and it kills me that we don't cover it more in our schools, and that we're not talking about, that's not something that history teachers and English teachers think is really important to have an entire unit on in their classes, because I think it's so important for young women today in particular to know that history so that they can own that word.
I think we also kind of Sorry. Yes, applause. I think we also kind of live in a bubble. Like, I forget this because the majority of people who follow me on Twitter and who I interact with on Tumblr or social media are people who are, if not entirely like-minded, that sort of have the same kind of values. And then all of a sudden, you come up against the rest of the world and you realize that, like, a lot of the progress we think, I mean, like, I think in recent days, what happened to Leslie Jones is a perfect example of the fact that, like, you know, that anytime you think that the work is done, the work is not done, man. Yeah. Like, we need as many young people on board as possible.
That was actually, that sort of leads naturally into the next question that I have, so maybe I can bring it down to Sarah, because one of the other questions that I had that I thoughtfully prepared, again, this morning, was how do you feel about the harassment of women online? You know, I think
I love the harassment of women online.
That's nice, but I asked Sarah.
But I just think we obviously all love the harassment of women online. In fact, raise your hand if you love the harassment of women online.
Well, no, I think but I think it's also I've seen to sort of get at why I ask this. I've seen some of my friends dialogue with their harassers. And sort of take the bless your heart approach to it, like that's, you know, like, it's so nice that you're interested in my work, or, oh, you know, poor you, or something like that. Or they go on the offensive and just say, like, you're a bag of dicks, get out, or something like that.
I've also seen women engage, like, really smartly with attackers too. Like, I have a friend within the YA world who people will go after her and she will destroy them with her wit, and it's Victoria Aveyard, and it's absolutely glorious.
It's very enjoyable.
But Sarah, let me toss it to you because I feel like we need to balance this equation somewhat.
I actually did want to say something specifically about the Leslie Jones situation because it kind of ties into what I was thinking about for the other question. Yes, I am a feminist. I've been a self-identified feminist since I was like 12. But I think one thing that we really need to work on in modern feminism is intersectionalism. Yeah. And I feel that the attacks on Leslie Jones were very also specifically racist. Yeah. She was targeted because she was a black woman. The other three women, like, there was definitely a lot of, you know, horrible sexist things said about all of the female Ghostbusters, but she was very targeted for being a black woman. And I think that one thing that I would really like us to see work on, because it helps, I think, all of these issues, it helps us come together to take on harassers and to sort of take on those bigger issues of sexism, is the intersectionalism. Because I think sometimes when we talk about as feminism as a group and we're sort of advancing the cause of women, what sometimes ends up happening is we're advancing the cause of white, cis, straight, able-bodied women. Yep. So, you know, we'll get like the sort of white female superheroes and everybody's like, oh yay, okay, we're done. And it's like, okay, no, wait, we still have more work to do. That's not enough.
To that end, how awesome! Go Roxane Gay, writing
yes.
a new first black woman author at Marvel.
And also the artist drawing that, Aletha Martinez, who is also an awesome woman of color artist, is actually drawing my Barbie comic. So it's an all women of color team on Barbie, which I think is really cool.
That is so not what I think of when I think of Barbie. So that is amazing.
All of this, not to make it too much about Barbie, but all the supporting characters in our Barbie comic are what we call BOC, Barbies of Color.
Nice. So actually, like, that sort of led me to want to ask Kathleen, do you talk in your book about about the impact of that kind of harassment, that kind of bullying, or when you sign on to be a fangirl, when you enter the life, when you leave the straight and narrow world of mainstream entertainment, which is now mainstream entertainment. Like, you've noticed how many people are here, right? Like, you see the money involved. Like, we are the mainstream now. You get that. Okay. What is the impact of that? Like, you as a therapist, I think, can sort of speak to that in a professional way that we've experienced it, but you can sort of talk about the long-ranging impact of that.
Right. And, you know, I think you really have to, in the moment, think about that sort of reactivity that you experience, sort of how to make it useful. I know, at least for me personally, thinking about being a feminist is thinking about seeing myself as sort of an unfinished product. And if I'm reactive to people who are biased or who are harassing other people, how can I make that an opportunity to grow myself, to challenge my own biases? Maybe I think that, an issue of representation has been handled really well, and it actually hasn't been. Listening to people and seeing it sort of turn back on myself, because if I shame someone back, if I prove them wrong, that can be good for them, that can feel good in the moment, but how is it going to be good for me, and how am I going to be, nudging myself a little bit farther along?
You're a much nicer person than I am. So do you have sort of self-care tips for when it just gets to be a lot, when it gets to be too much, or when you hear the one thing that sort of, that gets on the right frequency and sort of is shattering? Do you have are there strategies for dealing with the sort of for constant onslaught, or for a sudden sort of attack that undermines you?
Yeah, for me personally, I have a group of fangirl friends. I call them the committee, and it's a group text. So whenever I feel like I need to express something, but I'm not sure whether it needs to be on the internet or not, I just give it to the committee and see what they do with it. So.
I also have a girl gang text chain, and we call that Ribs, Run It By Someone.
Nice.
That's great, and now there's going to be an app for that. Yeah. So, okay, that's awesome. I'm really happy that we're having this conversation. So one of the other questions that I wanted to sort of direct to all of you, and I think I'll start with Kiersten this time, is a lot of feminist activism and a lot of feminism sort of in general, I think, relies on the storytelling. You were talking about how, we don't teach these things enough, and so it's only sort of in sort of activist communities and in sort of when you're trying to make change that you sort of hear these stories, the sort of feminist lore of women who acted up, right. the women, the well-behaved women who rarely make history, and so on, that you hear those stories, and so but we are all storytellers. So I think there's a unique power there that we sort of can offer. So, but at the same time, we're also all geeks. We're here because we are geek feminists. So what, for you, Kiersten, sort of what is it to be not just a feminist, but a geek feminist? What does that mean to you? Or does it mean something to you? Or am I just totally pulling this out of the air?
No, you're just no.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I think the thing about geek culture is it is always a little bit to the side of mainstream, and so I think it's easier to find people that we connect with there. But it's also just important to make sure that there's a wide variety to choose from, and that's what I love about YA, because in films we have Rey, and Rey is rad, but we just have Rey and Leia. They're the two women in the universe. But now we have Jin too, and I'm yeah, just keep adding them. Come on, let's just keep adding them, and then we can move away from the girl having to be the hero. Because if we have tons of representation, then they don't have to represent everything. And that's what I love about YA. People have been saying oh, Lada's a new feminist icon. I'm you do realize she's an anti-heroine? And it's the first book in 3, so if you think she's bad in this one, let's just move down 2 books and whoa. But that's what I love about YA, is because they have so many heroines that they can root for. I'm I can go as dark as I want to, because these teen girls are able to access so many different ways to be a girl and to be a woman. And that, I think, is what geek culture can provide and is moving toward providing, is that representation. And as we're becoming more diverse as well, and giving these readers not only somebody that they can identify with, but just ways to increase their empathy and to expand their their realizations that oh, not everybody is like me, and that's rad. That's super good, because if everybody was like me, woo, terrifying.
I don't know what you mean. I think that there's I think people are always treat the rise of young adult fiction and the fact that it is still a growing part of publishing as some kind of bizarre aberration. All the ladies and teens, and they're all drunk, and and who knows how they've been tricked into this bizarre marketing ploy known as YA, as opposed to thinking the market grew because people wanted those stories. And if they wanted different stories, they'd be consuming other stories. So there was clearly some kind of desire to see these kind of adventures and stories through what is predominantly a female lens, and what is increasingly a diverse lens. And I think that as when you start to rule the market is when you start to have power, and that's also when you start to see the articles come out about how destructive YA is, about how infantilist it is, about how women can't distinguish between fantasy and reality. Please somebody save the ladies.
Lock her up, lock her up.
Won't somebody think about the children? But I think that's always a great sign, okay? When people start to get freaked out, that's when you know you're doing it right. When people start to get angry, that means, you're putting something in front of them that they don't want to parse and they don't want to deal with. So it just means like it's a signpost that we're on the right road. So every time I used to get really mad when I'd see those articles, and I'd get on Twitter and be like, meh, 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 meh. And now I'm like, ha, 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 sucker. Like, y'all are going to be dead soon and the world will be ruled by girls who read YA.
But I think there's more. That's hard to follow. But
and good night,
as Leigh so often is. I like you. I'm looking for the idea of what is feminine to be detached from powerless, and the idea of what is masculine to be detached from powerful. I have a trans child who was designated female at birth, and my child is before they even came out to me as trans, said, why would I want to be a girl? It's the least powerful thing you could be. Who would want to be a girl? I'd rather be a freak than a girl, right? So as a lifelong feminist and a mom, right, mother of 2 daughters and my gender non-binary child, I was like, well, I've certainly screwed it up, right? Or the world has. But so that's been really interesting, and you saw that a lot with Hillary Clinton and the critique of who's a bad feminist and who's a good feminist and who's what wave feminist are you? And I've really it's been a project, particularly with this child and myself, to be like, well, what is strong? Why do you associate the girl parts of you, with weakness, or how can we support each other as creatures despite any gender persuasion? How can we kind of move beyond boxes that assign genders to traits, right? Can we get past that? Because that's kind of bullshit. And I'm really ready for some other way of looking at people.
One thing I wanted to mention specifically about geek feminism, because I feel like my experience as a geek feminist has really changed over the last, 5 or 6 years, which sort of relates to something you're saying about, YA coming out and being very female dominated and having lots of female characters, is I think that a lot of girl geeks who grew up when I grew up, I was often the only girl at the comic shop. I was, the only girl going to Star Wars. I was, in my community, and when I started writing fiction, a lot of times it was the one girl surrounded by dudes. Because even though I've always had female friends, they weren't always female friends who understood the geek side of me. They were just like, oh, that's nice that you had that. Go hang out with the boys when you want to talk about Star Wars. And I think with things like Twitter and things that have made it easier for us to connect. Now I have the Geek Girl Gang, and you were saying you have the Geek Girl Gang on the text chain, and that's also changed my writing because now I write, predominantly casts of women who have relationships with each other, which I think is also important for us as geek feminists to see in the world that we're not always the only one, and that there are stories that represent that.
Yeah, I think I actually had a. Oh yeah, no. Good. Yeah. I wanted to add to that sometimes you don't find your tribe, you don't find your crew, your posse, your ribs, your group until you find the right story for you. I think there's something about finding the right story and then finding your people. For me, that was anime. I got into that through anime. It certainly was not the Heinlein novels under my dad's bed, because gross. Yeah, no, applaud, because there's weird, yeah, yay, incest. But when I found that, I found all the other anime fangirls, and suddenly we could talk. Like suddenly we were speaking our own special language, which was literally another language, and so I think that if you haven't, I just want to say, like, if you haven't found that group of people yet, you will find them possibly through another story or just when you go to college.
I found some of my best friends because we liked an actress's hair. And I love telling people that. It's literally anything can connect you with other women.
Was it
and
Connie?
What
Whose
actress's hair?
There's so many actresses, but definitely Mary McDonnell from Laura Roslin from Battlestar Galactica.
Her hair.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of other things too, but I love telling people it's like a hair squad.
Because I've heard that there's like a unifying power for Connie Britton's hair.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
It is extraordinary.
It has its own Twitter account, so it does. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the unifying power of hair.
I would love to hear what other people's fandoms were, because Sarah, you were talking about being a fan and about finding those people. I'm just curious to know what, because sometimes like what we love,
Yeah.
sort of, and what communities we've been a part of.
I mean, my formative ones were definitely things like Star Wars and X-Men and Star Trek, and I think sort of a lot of classic things that kids of my generation grew up with.
Mm-hmm. I definitely had a harder time connecting with geeks until later in life, and that was mostly based around YA literature. When I really got into YA literature was through Twilight, which, as a feminist, obviously is very fraught, but...
I honestly think Twilight gets I'm gonna get punched in the face, but I think Twilight kind of gets a bad rap.
Oh, I do too.
None of us would be up on this stage if it weren't for Twilight.
Yes,
so
No, and I loved Twilight. I loved my first reading of it. It was incredibly entertaining, and I was like, hey, wait a second, because when I was a teenager, there wasn't that YA shelf, or if there was, I wasn't aware of it, and I was reading things like Faulkner because I thought I should. Didn't understand any of it, but I read it. And so then finding that world of YA in my early 20s, just opened up this entire new avenue.
Seriously, Soman, where are you going?
She really loved Faulkner.
Yeah.
It's like,
sorry.
You're just, done now.
Yeah. but then it's and then it's finding the common ground. I loved Buffy, and if I found anybody else, right? If I found anybody else in high school who loved Buffy, it was instant friend. Yeah.
Kathleen?
All right, so I first got started with Star Wars, but I consider myself, I'm not really part of too many fandoms. I'm these sort of women, badass ladies over 40 on television shows. So that's sort of my thing. And it's interesting because I found that I gatekeep myself sometimes.
Wait, there are women over 40 on television
shows? There's so many.
Somewhere in Hollywood, somebody's like, we have to find them and burn them. If they float, they're not witches. Yeah.
They've activated a SEAL team right now.
Unfortunately, they don't invite the cast of The Good Wife to Comic-Con, so we don't see people like that.
They're not here.
Yeah.
So I grew up watching Star Wars on a Betamax tape that my dad had taped off of TV. And so I would loop that over and I would watch it multiple times a day. That and Jaws and basically if it was made by anyone from ILM, I loved it. And watching syndicated Star Trek episodes with my father as well. And whereas my mom was a giant Gothic literature nerd, she told me the story of Jane Eyre before I ever read it. So spoilers.
Which I actually find more problematic than Twilight.
Yeah.
So there.
So I was sort of brought into this, and then fandom-wise, I got active in fandom sort of in university and in high school, and then university, and then for a while, I was very deeply involved in the Avatar: The Last Airbender fandom. I was really that was one of the fandoms that taught me that I should in fact be a published novelist, because I rose to a level within that fandom that sort of taught me that I should be trying to do other things. So, and finish, or at least just get paid. And that was nice. So yeah, that was sort of where, that was the proving ground, I guess. So.
If you guys know this, because you've been on panels with me, I was madly in love with Han Solo, not so much Harrison Ford, but Han Solo. I broke federal law recording Han Solo in the second movie, the I Love You, I Know, on my cassette tape recorder, and then played it before I went to sleep every night, because that's not creepy. Then I did have a sweatshirt that said Margaret Ford, and we crank called him every day from our girls' school because someone's dad worked in the law firm of his lawyer. But we were smart enough to ask for his sons, Benjamin and Willard, so we thought it was cute. That's really funny. The really creepy thing is the guy who was the star of Beautiful Creatures, which was my adaptation. Alden Ehrenreich is now playing the young Han Solo, so that's not creepy. So I started there. I worked in video games for 18 years, so I came out, and that was my first experience working with Marvel. So I have a traditional comics games. I was the only girl. I had the girls' bathroom as the office all to myself. I was the lead designer on an old game called Zork Grand Inquisitor that had been a text adventure. And I walked into one meeting, and a programmer looked up and said, "Oh, look, the stripper's here." So, that was I've been the only girl in the room for a long, long time. And, the things I put up with, and I've said this before a lot on the Women of Marvel panels, I'm not sure I'd put up with them now, but I wanted to be in the room. Right. And I think it's really important that we have girls in those rooms. And I wanted to go to lunch with the team, and I took a lot of shit because I wanted to be one of the guys. There were trade-offs. I got in the room, and I was the lead designer on the project, and I was a designer on a lot of projects after that. But there was a lot of give and take. But I think what I have learned from that, the thing that's changed now from then is that I always say the thing. Right. Back then, I never said the thing. I always thought the thing. Now I always say the thing. So that's what I try to model. I try to model my hero, Victoria Aveyard, is sitting in the back. Aww. And she's the girl who most often says the thing online. In fact, she's famous among my writer friends for saying the thing to the people who harass us online. And that's the thing I think we can all do for each other, is say the thing. And say the thing when someone's bullshitting your friends, say the thing, right? Because sometimes you just don't have the energy to say it every time.
Were we talking about fandoms?
Yes.
I lost the question.
It started that way. Yes.
So I didn't really get that there were fandoms as a kid. I lived in this really isolated place, and I was just too afraid to express any love. Yeah, it's a place in the Mojave Desert, sort of this black hole of a place, and I'm sure there were fandoms, but I wasn't part of it. Pretty much, yeah. Well, Dune would have been the greatest fandom of all, kind of, yeah. Anyway, so I didn't really understand the idea of fandoms until I was a huge fan of fantasy books. I loved Buffy, but I didn't get that you could be a fan with other humanoids until I started reading Harry Potter in college. That was where I was my friends were "We'll come to the thing, the midnight party," and I was like, "What? There's a midnight party? Well, other people like this book. I can talk to you about theories, and I can read this is Snape good or evil book with you. This is crazy." I learned about fan fiction in college. It was very late in life that I understood. And then after that, I would say my fandoms were definitely Buffy. Harry Potter's probably the biggest one, and Battlestar Galactica actually was a very big fandom for me. I adore that show. It had a huge impact on my writing and on my life. I watched it a million times. So,
I think about it a lot.
I do, yeah. I do too. I'm it was very short and sweet. You had your 4 seasons, and then that was sort of it. I don't really count Caprica. But those are my fandoms, and now I actually find myself sort of the Game of Thrones fandom is one that I'm kind of a part of, but I don't really have that same passion for the fangirling as I did when it was it's nothing can compare to Harry Potter. That fandom is so powerful that it's hard to.
Weirdly enough, I think my first fandom was the movie Highlander. And I just realized this while sitting here sort of listening to the early experiences thing, because I did not grow up in I didn't have a knowledge of fandom culture. I didn't know what that was. There was not, we did not have of the computers and the internet. And, but I do remember they showed that movie on cable. We had pirated cable, and take me to jail. And that movie was on constantly, and I watched it like a million times. And then I remember like being like at a high school cafeteria and saying like there was like one croissant left. I mean, like there can be only one. And this guy behind me being like, Kurgan, Connor, and I was like, and there was like, this was the first moment when it was like fandom. And I still feel a weird kinship for people who understand like the glory and the horror that is that movie. But when I got older, I think my first real fandom experience was Game of Thrones, was the books, A Song of Ice and Fire, and it was the first community I connected with. I joined the Brotherhood Without Banners, George R. R. Martin's fan club. I camped out at signings. I met incredible people, and it is the BWB is like shockingly diverse. Like I remember meeting a bunch of them at a signing and then going for drinks afterwards and being like, and when I say diverse, I mean in terms of gender, sexuality, color, like class, like of every variety, age, like, and thinking, wow, this is not what people think fandom looks like. Like there's a real myth about geek culture that's out there, and this is not what it looks. And in fact, that's a lasting myth. It's something that and that I think has hit. People forget how involved women in particular were in early science fiction and fantasy, and how many of the pioneers and still working authors are women. But yeah, I got knighted by George R. R. Martin. I'm Sarah Lee the second. There was a first Sarah Lee, who I must destroy. In season. Who said that? Who said that? You are my new favorite human. I'm gonna give you a present. Yeah.
She's my friend. I can introduce you.
I love her.
So I've been told that there are 15 minutes, which I know that you guys must have questions. So I want you to, someone has been, yeah. Start your engines, get going now, because all right, and given that there are a lot of you, and it looks like there will be a lineup. Yes, they're moving towards the line. Get your questions ready, and as long as they are questions and not, but I have more of a comment. That will no, I'm not doing that. That doesn't fly. Yeah. So yeah, questions. Short and sweet and direct.
Okay, I'll try to make it. I have a friend who doesn't qualify herself as a feminist because she's like, if you are, just be. And why do we have to convince other people to be so? And I was wondering if any of you had something I could say to her.
Leave.
No.
To her.
I think maybe just ask her to be more nuanced than that, because the world is not that simple. If we might think that way, and that's great for us, but right now the battle is sort of also out there, and that's what's way more important than what's easy. So it is sort of an easy answer, and I don't think we should always take the easy road. So maybe, I don't know if that's helpful.
I would say too that people who do carry that title are under fire and attack. Yep. And to step away from that because you, for some theoretical reason, I feel like is a little bit cowardly. And I would also say that, if the case is that she says that and then she embodies it through action, like if she shows up offline, if she retweets and sometimes I think our job is just to reblog voices and give them a greater platform, and to not worry about being like the good guy who has something to say. I think if she's doing that, then that's a different story than just being like, well, if she's not, then bring her to me.
I also think if you look at as a gay mommy, as a trans mommy, I am so sensitive to people thinking my issue is not their issue. Right?
Yeah.
So even my great friends, if it's not a thing that they're experiencing personally, but I'm openly opining or aching about something incredibly homophobic that just happened, I'm totally aware of who is retweeting or not retweeting something. I'm so vulnerable and looking for solidarity. Can we feel for people who don't have the identical experience we have? That is the ultimate human experience. So I think for her, empathize and put yourself out there, because it kind of is a battle. That's what I would say. Coming out. I think people need to come out.
Show up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much for this panel. It's really great.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I've spent a lot of time cultivating a library of women authors and women-centered characters, and but I also love Rachel Rising by Terry Moore and Squirrel Girl and these other really great characters that are written by men. So I guess my question is kind of where do men as artists and as fans fit into this conversation, and how can we try and bring that, we were talking about intersectionality and I think that also, I think men play a part in that, and I'm interested because I think I often fight against that a lot, and like when I heard about Rachel Rising and I was like, oh, but it's written by a dude, like what but then it was amazing. So I just kind of was wondering your thoughts on this.
But if you think about so many of the fandoms that we just mentioned,
Joss Whedon,
Game of Thrones, George R. R. Martin, Joss Whedon, George Lucas, there were a lot of dudes who were mentioned here. Yeah. But I think that, for me, I think that our goal is to unstigmatize things that are created by women or that present a feminist picture of the world or feminist ideals. And that means that we can be critical of things we love. There are things about Game of Thrones, particularly the adaptation, and honestly the books as well, that I don't like. It's okay to have problems with things that you love. It is okay to love something that is flawed. But I think there's also Margie spoke, I think, beautifully about this in terms of divorce. The patriarchy doesn't just have its boot on the necks of women. It has it on the necks of men as well, right. And the expectations that are put on them. So yeah, to be inclusive, and also to say, when we shame, when people get out there, I joked about those articles, but the problem with them is that they increase the idea of shaming the idea that the things girls like or things that focus on women are embarrassing to love. And I've had kids show up at my signings and be like, I really love your book. Yeah. And they're like, we shame those things, and therefore they become inaccessible to a big chunk of the population, and we're not doing anybody a service by that.
Hi, I'm a 51-year-old geek girl. Proud of all this white stuff. I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my very geeky heart. So much of what you all have said is like me. I was raised in the 70s by a father who thought that superhero comic books, even if they had women in them, were for boys. Archie was okay, and I like Archie, but I wanted Superman and the X-Men. So thank you all so much. It's women like you with your work. It's the fantabulous, and I know Sarah Amber Benson is one of your good friends. She tweets about you quite often. And the absolute goddess of geekness, Felicia Day, even Claire Kramer and her Geek Nation, you all have just made this so much easier for me, and I'm sure a lot of women. So thank you all for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you for staying. Gryffindor.
Tough act to follow. Kind of in tears. Okay, I am actually a 7th grade reading, writing, social studies teacher. Also a product of an all-girls school that my sister's going to be teaching at next year, actually. And I specifically have a question for Kiersten White. Since I am a social studies teacher, and since I do get to see the one sentence in social studies books about women, and knowing that there are amazing historical figures out there, like Hypatia, and just like amazing people, I'm just wondering why you decided to go like the gender bent way with Vlad the Impaler and that kind of stuff, as opposed to like writing about those women.
That is such a legitimate question. This was history that I loved and that I really wanted to tell a story in, but unfortunately in this time period, you did not have a lot of women recorded. I mean, even the mother of Mehmed the Conqueror, who's the Sultan who overthrew Constantinople, like, she's a big deal. We're not entirely sure what her name was. Like, they don't know. They think she was an Albanian. Guys, words. They think she was from Albania. They think that she was a slave concubine that converted to Islam, but they don't know. And that drives me nuts. because you have all of these huge men. Well, guess what? You would have had just as strong women all around them. So that was part of why I decided to do this, because I wanted to explore what a woman in this time period would have had to do to gain that much power. But I didn't want to write about an actual historical figure. So I just gender swapped Vlad the Impaler. Because to me, it made so much more sense for a woman to be that brutal in the pursuit of power, because she would have had to be worse than everyone else in order to get and then maintain that power. But one thing I did try to do was pull from real-life historical women. I mentioned Theodora of Byzantium in here, who was a prostitute who ended up married to the emperor. And when he was going to flee the country, she's like, screw that. I'm not leaving. This is my throne. Killed everybody who was opposing them and kept the throne. So I did try to pull from a lot of actual historical figures, and if I do write more historical fiction, which I might not, it's a pain in the butt, but I would definitely try to focus more on an actual. But I mean, that's a legit question. Yeah, it just was the story I wanted to tell.
No criticism out of it. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Hi, so I'm a woman creator, and I've been encountered in situations where I've had to choose between opportunities and either defending an idea of feminism or even proving my feminism to other men. So I wanted to ask you guys on how you traverse those situations where you might be in a position where you have to kind of compromise your morals a little bit for an opportunity.
When you say, can I just ask a clarifying question? Like,
Yeah.
prove your feminism in what way? Like,
almost like feminism testing. Like, you know how you're
like
geek cred tested by some people? Like feminism tested. Like, did you hear about this? Oh, you didn't? Judgment, you know what I'm saying?
So do they want you to be like not
like
a serious feminist, or they want you to be a really like they're like show us the receipts from your donations to Planned Parenthood?
Like the latter. Like the latter.
I got this, but like.
Like you're supposed to be the representative of the entirety of like feminism within geekdom.
Waiting for you to be a bitch, right?
Almost,
like it's a setup.
Yeah, it's almost like they're waiting for you, almost to prove that they're a better male feminist than a woman is. Almost, you know,
not
you know
all
what
men.
I'm saying?
They're not all men.
But they're not a woman.
Yeah. They're not all men.
But how do you traverse that? Like trying to balance professional relationships with standing by your guns, you know?
I think we're really lucky in YA. I mean, my agent is a woman, my editor is a woman, my publicist is a woman, the publisher of my publishing house is a woman. So, like, YA is this like, awesome, super supportive. Like, it's really easy to be.
You're making a sound.
Yeah.
There's a couple of different sounds.
Okay, well, my experience with YA has been, I mean, and I've never been told no, which has been really fantastic. So, I mean, I don't know.
Oh, it's on now.
Yeah.
No, I'm actually not gonna disagree with you at all. What my comment is that I run into this with diversity a lot, and you know, I think that I have found, and this has been tough. I used to work at a newspaper, and when I worked at the newspaper, I was the only Pakistani at this entire newspaper. It is a huge newspaper, and they have a very large international section. It was actually a little shocking to me that I was one of the only people who knew like that much about the Middle East and about South Asia. And I found over time that I did compromise sometimes, and I always hated myself for it, always. And when I stopped, and when I started really saying what I thought, whether it upset people or not, and telling people this is biased, this is racist, this is wrong, and not saying what they wanted me to say and what they expected me to say, I was much happier with myself. I could look at myself in the mirror, and that is all that really mattered. Yeah. And you know, we all need a paycheck, and I totally understand that, but you also have to, at the end of the day, you have to be able to look at what you have done in your life and at your body of work and be proud of that. So I think that's more important.
But that's the thing I'm saying, where I say the thing now. I didn't say the thing when I was you and I was trying to get the job and be in the room. And it is, as you say, always a trade-off. But nowadays, I honestly think sometimes the risk has never, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of, it's never going to go away, right? Because there's unconscious bias and all levels of people's judgments on what you're thinking and doing. But I do agree with Sabaa that I feel like I have to say the thing more and more.
I would also say, though, once you get in the room, and even if you do compromise, one, let yourself off the hook a little bit, okay? Like, your job is also to stay in the room so that you can bring more women into the room.
Yeah.
And you can bring more marginalized people into the room. I just want to say, too, like, I've had a wonderful experience in YA, and it is an incredibly great environment, and I work almost, I think, exclusively with women in publishing. However, I don't want to paint this picture that it's some grand kind of utopia. We're still a community that venerates the voices of men over the voices of women, and the straight voices over the voices, and white voices over the. So this is not we are not without fault, you know.
Yeah, no.
And I mean, I think we've all seen it in action, and you can, and I think it's changing, but I think we kind of have to be sort of aware of that.
Yeah. Whereas what I would tell you is that like this is like a different feminist utopia compared to what I am used to in the world of science fiction.
Yeah.
That is.
I mean, we got the puppies.
Yeah. No.
We got some sad puppies.
Yeah, we do, and some rabbit ones. So no, we have some animals who need putting down. So yeah, I mean, like I think that there is a long, you know, it isn't always great. It is not always great.
Stop.
Oh, it isn't always great, but it's not always gonna suck.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think that is it. Unfortunately, but we are going to a signing after this under the they call it Under the Sails because apparently it's prom in an 80s movie.
I think I'm actually at the Disney booth, but I think these guys, is that right? I'm at the Disney booth and these guys are at sales.
We're all in autograph area 9, I believe.
Yes, 9.
And yes, join us.
So come join us. Come say hello.